Hello everyone, welcome to Econ 1101. I'm Alberto from the Econ 1101 team. I hope everybody is doing great today. Look at this beautiful day. And still, we have a lot of people coming in today. It's even more appreciated when you have the opportunity to go to Coogee Beach on a day like this. Thank you so much for coming. Now, I am starting at 11:35. Just to give people enough time to go from their previous class to the online stream. So that's why I'm starting 5 minutes late. And I'm gonna try to end also very close to maybe 10 minutes before the end of our slot here, so you can get to the next one as well. Welcome everyone. We are gonna have Trent, our moderator, coming in very soon and answering your questions on the chat room. I've been answering a few of them. I have Vic asking, where's the lecture at? I can't seem to find it. So it's on the YouTube, Econ 101. I'm gonna just write that, Econ 101 YouTube channel. Hopefully everybody is finding this. Well, welcome to this class, and let me tell you a bit the structure that could be helpful for you to refer to every week, and you can find that in your weekly checklist here in your playeconomics.com ebook. And for each week you have a nice simple breakdown of the concepts we are going to cover, and also where to find the chapter in the textbook, and also some review and additional questions that you can do if you want to dig a little bit deeper. Plus, you have the slides down here that you can download, and these are the slides that I'm gonna cover today as we start our first online content stream. Very well, everybody. This is where we start from, and let's move on to our slides. Part 1, comparative advantage and the basis of trade. Okay, everybody, this title may not be as exciting as you may be hoping. Comparative advantage is a strange name. The basis for trade feels all very abstract, but all this stuff is actually really human. It's very important to us as human beings every day, and there are some incredible intuitions this lecture. So let me go back to try to motivate why this is so important. You probably know that if you were to graph progress and development for human beings, you put time in here, and this progress, you would end up with a graph where for millions and millions of years, we would have had very little progress, very little development. We are talking millions and millions of years. So our story as human beings, it doesn't look like very exciting for a long time. And this was a period of diseases, death, and violence. It was dark ages, essentially. It was not easy to live during those times. So our colleagues from the past had a pretty rough run for many millions of years. But if you look at progress and development in recent years, the recent century, for example, has been staggering, exponential. So we went from almost nothing for the longest of time to having this absolutely stunning increase in progress, which has improved our lives considerably, from medicine to education, to more stable institutions, to less wars. All of that was allowed by this incredible exponential development. And it is getting more and more exponential with AI kicking in. People are wondering how far we are gonna be able to go even. So this happened, and that's one of my main arguments. This hockey stick, that's how economists call it, because it looks a bit like a hockey stick that's flat and then it goes exponentially up. This thing has been possible because people, humans, have collaborated more with each other. They have traded more, they have exchanged goods and ideas more, and that alone essentially has created an incredible shape. So we were kind of hopeless for a while. We were there, not going anywhere, and then we started working together, and that's what happens next. Of course, I know we live in difficult times. Politically, it's never been a more divided time, and we see a lot of tension, and there's a lot of toxic stuff going on this day. It's very sad what we are doing. And I know that as a cohort, you are probably less optimistic than the cohort I saw, say, 10 years ago when I was giving this subject, this course 10 years ago. Well, we have climate change, which we are having trouble getting a handle on. We have inequality, which is rampant and creates a lot of the political issues that we see right now. Economists believe that the lack of social mobility and the massive increase in inequality in the world has created this political instability. Democracy works well if everybody's happy, but if only a few are getting ahead, that's when democracy tends to break down. We understand there are a lot of topics, and even AI, what I just said about this exponential progress that we're having. Is this reassuring or is this scary? Are we chewing too much? Are we able to control our own incredible progress curve? These are all absolutely legitimate questions, but I want to nudge you to think about those millions of years where, you know, we were arguably in much worse shape. We had no institutions to talk with. We had no democracy to speak of. There was a lot of hardship that our fellow humans during those ages had to go through to survive. Just want to bring a bit of optimism here. We are doing incredible progress. Of course, there is a lot more work to do. And this is what we're gonna talk about in this subject. We are gonna talk about ways in which we can improve the world and kind of get that progress to point in the right direction for the largest amount of people possible. But remember, although trade may sound like a word that doesn't excite many people, it is at the basis of most of our well-being today. Now, even the whole idea of trade is sometimes underestimated. Human relationships are fantastic, but certain economists are saying that the pinnacle of human interaction is actually trade and markets. Well, you know, arguably, people put a lot of love, for example, into making this pair of glasses. It's a beautiful box. And then the glasses themselves, there was a lot of ingenuity, a lot of intelligence and hard work that went into making this thing for so many people along the supply chain. So certain economists are thinking that this is actually someone giving me the fruit of their labors, this thing. It's so helpful to me. It took so much effort to do. This is the pinnacle of human interactions. Of course, I'm not saying that's correct. Maybe friendship is the pinnacle of human interaction. I'm completely happy to explore the argument here, but do not underestimate the love that we get when we are using and we really find the product useful, and the amount of effort that it took to get it to us and to develop and to build it in the first place. This is my starting point. I hope I made an argument here that trade is not a dry thing. It's at the basis of how and why we can live the life we live. And it's important to understand how trade happens, and we are going to unpack what that strange word means, comparative advantage. What is this? Interesting. That's what we're going to unpack today. I'm going to try to do these classes, instead of going through slides, I'm going to try to derive in front of you, starting from a complete white canvas like this. So white, empty mind, we start and we derive all the graphs and all the concepts in this class. However, I am going to ask you in 10 minutes or so if you like this approach. In the past, it has been the preferred option for students because It's also my preferred option because I think our brain works in a way that we need to see the derivation of things in order to really follow. If I project the slide, you'll see a lot of words, and that's like cognitively a little hard to put together. I prefer this way, but if you instead are gonna nudge me into following the slides more one-to-one, I can also do that. It's not a problem for me at all. So let's get started. First, we're gonna make our graph here. That's it, our first graph. When you do any graph, the important thing is to label the axis because this is telling the story of what's going on in your graph. Like on the y-axis, I'm gonna put the amount of rabbit that someone is catching and producing. But it's not just the thing we are producing. We also want to know what's the unit measure, in this case kilograms, and we also want to know that time measure, in this case kilograms per day. Very important to say, whatever it's on the y-axis is kilograms per day of rabbit. And similarly, I'm going to label my graph on the x-axis, bananas, kilograms per day. Now, this is a nicely labeled graph. Your handwriting is probably better than mine, but you're getting the point here of what I'm trying to say. In your exam, in your assessments, always label the graphs. Otherwise, people will not know exactly what you're talking about. And then imagine there is a person in the textbook and in the slides. I call this person Alberto. It's a bit of a lack of imagination for sure here. Alberto can do only 2 activities. Well, he can produce 1 kilograms of bananas, and that would take Alberto 1 hour. Kilogram of banana takes 1 hour, and 1 kilogram of rabbit. Of course, that rabbit is running around, doesn't want to be caught. So in this little simple example, we are going to say that the rabbit here takes 2 hours to Alberto to produce. And then we have the time available to Alberto to work each day, which is 16 hours. So Alberto can work for 16 hours. Very well. So that's a super simple example, or how we're going to see in a second, what we call a model. There is a person. This person has only 2 activities, bananas and rabbit. It takes 1 hour to produce a banana, 2 hours to produce 1 kilogram of rabbit. They have 16 hours altogether to work. How does that translate into this graph? Well, if Alberto spends all his time, all the available time catching rabbit, he'll be able to catch 8 kilograms because remember, 16 hours, it takes 2 hours to collect each rabbit. So 16 divided by 2, it's 8 rabbit that Alberto can take home if he does only that, only catching rabbit. So this one here, this point here, is effectively our production that Alberto can carry out if he works only on rabbit. But how about the opposite? Alberto goes out there and actually collects only banana. Well, it's 1 hour per banana. You have it right here. 16 hours totally available. So 16 divided by 1, Alberto can produce up to 16 bananas per day. Very well. So this is another possible production point down here, 16. That's pretty cool. Now, of course, Alberto can also mix and match, say spends 8 hours, split in half his day. And so he might be able to get some rabbit and some bananas as well in a combination that, for example, looks like this if Alberto spends half his time doing one activity and half his time doing the other activity. Now, because productivities are constant, these items here, these ones, are actually constant. They don't change during the day. What we can do when we have 2 or more points is just connect all of them into one line. And that line has all the points that Alberto can produce in a day if he spends all the time working, all these 16 hours of available time working. And these points have a different amount of bananas and rabbit inside of them. Now, for example, this point here, we call in economics an efficient point. Why do we call it efficient? Because it's a point where Alberto is using all available resources, all hours that they have, and there's nothing left. 16 hours are available, Alberto uses all of them. It's also a point that we call attainable. attainable point because, well, it can be produced and it's also efficient. How about this point here, for example? This point down there, is this an attainable point? Well, it is. Alberto, you can verify it very quickly. I think, oops, I'm going too low there, going into an area that it's not even visible to you. So this is attainable because Alberto can in fact produce that point. You can verify it very simply. But is this point efficient? Is Alberto using all the available hours to produce that point? And the answer is no. And one way to think about this, like suppose this is when it does one rabbit and one banana, one way to quickly prove that this is not an efficient point is to do the following. You can say, well, Alberto could increase production of rabbit from 1 to 2, moving from this point to this other point that has more rabbit than before, without having to sacrifice any banana, right? Because this point still have, one banana, but now it has 2 rabbit compared to this original point where it was 1 rabbit, 1 banana. So in any case, you can find where you can increase the production of one good without decreasing the production of the other, then you know that that original point is not efficient, even though it may be attainable. And of course, this could also be possible, like producing more bananas while keeping the amount of rabbit the same, or you could even move diagonally, which implies producing more of both. If you are in a point like this, we say you are in an attainable point, but it's inefficient. You could have worked harder. That's it. Inefficient. Now, what happens instead if you try this point up here? Well, this is not attainable. You can verify it pretty quickly as well. You just don't have enough time to produce those points. In fact, any point outside here is unattainable. This gives us a very cool mapping of everything that we can and we cannot do, because in this part of the graph here, we have all the unattainable. Oh, I made a mistake here. Apologies, everyone. This should have been unattainable, so this cannot be attained, so unattainable. All these points here are unattainable, all of them. The points in here are in fact attainable, but they are inefficient. You could have produced a little bit more of something, but without sacrificing anything else. And the points on this particular line are both attainable and efficient. Here is the mapping. Here is what we're going to look at today. Now, let me show one concept here that's really important, which is the idea of a model. A model is a simplified representation of reality. And that's exactly what we have built here. So it's a model because, well, Alberto is only characterized as his ability to produce. So Alberto might have feelings, emotion, thoughts, a lot of different things. A model is not a simulation of reality, doesn't try to capture everything that Alberto is, but it's trying to simplify that into a simple model that can be insightful, that can help us think about the big problems while still simplifying things. And that's what a simple model is. Before ChatGPT, I couldn't explain this, I think, and get through to everybody, but now I can, because ChatGPT is a language model. ChatGPT is not a real person. So it's a simplified version of a person that can talk. And it's pretty good at talking, but it's not a person. That's a model. The interesting thing about models is that when you ask the model a question, the model is giving you an answer, and that answer could be insightful, brilliant, helpful. That's what models are. You ask them a question and they tell you something back that's helpful. Even the creator of ChatGPT was surprised by some of the answers they received, because after all, when you create a model, then the creation is talking to the creator and can give insight and intuition back. That's pretty amazing. The creator learns from its creation. It's pretty wonderful. Economic models are doing exactly that. It's not about language, Economics models are about behavior, what people do in life. But they work in a similar way. We go ask a question to the model, and then we ask essentially what is the behavior of this artificial intelligence that we have created in the model, what is its behavior? And sometimes by asking these questions to our own models, we learn something really interesting. This is a model that seems so simple that at first you may think like, I don't know that I can learn anything from this model. It's so basic, but it's not. I'm going to show you that if you use this model long enough, you will discover something kind of amazing about human interaction, human development, and things that are really important to us as people. Now, this is the idea of a model. The other example is Google Map. It tells you how to go from point A to B, and it's really helpful. Even if it's not a perfect mapping one-to-one of reality, that wouldn't be helpful because it would be a map as big as the world. But instead, in being simplified, just showing you the roads, just being roughly similar to reality, it gets you from A to B. That's another model. We ask the model how to get somewhere, it tells us the road, it's helpful, and it might even surprise us. We might learn new roads by asking the model a question. So in similar ways, we ask economic models questions, and we learn from it. Now, I promised you that I would go through the slides and show you how I did everything with the diagram. That could have done also by following the slides step to step. I'm going to do it quickly, then I'm going to ask you a question, which version of the course you prefer. Now, we talked about, of course, the assumptions of this model, two possible activities, oh, by the way, so this is actually some extra assumptions that I'm going to talk about in a second. Now, we talked about Alberto, two production activities, bananas and rabbit. We talked about the productivity, how much time Alberto had. The scarce resource in this case is time. Then we have two extreme scenarios where he collected only bananas or rabbit. Then we also talked about the intermediary scenarios, like for example, spending half day doing one thing and half day doing the other, or some other variation of that. Then we derived the production possibility curve in the graph, which represent all the combinations of banana and rabbit that can be produced with Alberto's labor if Alberto spends the whole day doing that. And we ended up with this graph that we just derived together. And then we also talked about the idea of an efficient point. It's a point where you cannot increase the production of one good without sacrificing some of the other. You're using all the hours. And the idea of inefficient point, that's a point where you can actually increase the production of something without sacrificing the other good. So you're not using all the resources that you have. We talked about attainable points, which are inside the PPC. And we talked about unattainable points, that are the points that are outside, above, and to the right of the production possibility curve. This is where we are at the moment. Now, can I ask you briefly, also as a way for me to be a little bit in contact with you, if you prefer me to derive the rest of the class by hand from scratch, from a white canvas, or if you prefer instead me to follow the slides one-to-one. So, I'm going to say that even if I draw everything by hand, I will go through the slides very quickly like I just did to make sure that everybody can map from my drawing to the actual slides. So please let me know. As I said before, there is a bit of latency in the YouTube live stream. It's a trade-off between quality of the stream and the time, how fast it can be just broadcasted. So you're gonna hear me with a little bit of a delay. That's why I'm buying a little bit of time here, and just to wait for you to hear my question and then write in the chat. So if it looks like I have a delay, it's because I'm a bit delayed. That's for real. I'm gonna get a little bit of caffeine in there. Prepare the slides. We have one person preparing the slides by hand. Derive, please. From scratch, white canvas, a mix deriving. with the relation to the slides work well by hand. Blank canvas, I read the slide before this lecture, perfect. I prefer deriving by hand. Okay, so it looks like what I'm hearing, and please keep the feedback coming, and I'm gonna keep looking at that screen with your chat. It looks like people prefer me to derive things, which is what I expected. It's usually the response, but I agree with also people that says, can you tie that to the slides, which is something that I will do. So maybe we can have both, the best of both worlds, and of course this might be helpful also for Kieran that prefer the slides instead. Hopefully it will be enough. Let me know, Kieran, how you feel about mixing and matching, deriving, and then going back to the slides. Now, this model gets a little bit more complicated, which was that slide that I kind of skipped a second ago, where we are actually introducing Leo. So Leo is another agent in this economy, and Leo has different productivity. So one banana actually takes Leo 4 hours to produce. So it takes Leo 4 hours to produce one banana. One rabbit takes Leo 4 hours as well. So these are Leo's productivity, and Leos can work for 16 hours a day, just like Alberto. In short, we have a situation where we're adding another agent. These agents have different productivity, and very quickly, I don't want to, bore you too much. I'm gonna just draw Leo's production possibility. Not bananas. That was rabbit on this axis here. I was almost forgetting my own lesson of always labeling the graph, so I'm doing that. That's a precautionary tale. Never forgetting bananas, and apologies for my handwriting, which is getting worse and worse as the class goes on. If I was to draw the production possibility curve of Leo, it's an interesting one, because if Leo does only bananas with 4 hours and 16 hours of time available, it would be 16 divided by 4. We have only 4 rabbits for the entire day, or Leo could do only bananas. Again, it's the same productivity as the other good, so still 4 bananas per day. So that's Leo's production possibility curve. I just need 2 points and I connect them. And of course, Alberto was more productive, clearly, because he could get 8 rabbit if he did only rabbit, and actually 16 kilograms of bananas if Alberto focused only on bananas. Now, here is the power of the model and interrogating the model and try to understand it. And this model was created by Ricardo, who is one of the most famous economists. Ricardo, keep that name in mind. Very, very cool person. They invented this model 200 years ago. And there was a big political debate at that time in England, which was a debate around trade. And, the big question at the time was, should England trade with Portugal? That was the question. And essentially, that's where this graph and this simple model, which is effectively based on 4 numbers, that's the magic of this moment, of this model, because it's literally just 4 numbers, the productivities of Alberto and Leo. So 4 numbers in total. It's all that took for Ricardo to build up this model. And as I was saying, the question was, should England, this is the world, should England trade with Portugal? That was the question that politicians were asking. And, not to give away too much, but this is almost exactly like when Bob Dylan wrote Blowing in the Wind. Yes, and how many roads must a man? That song took 10 minutes to do. This model took 4 numbers to do. Super, super simple guitar voice, a little bit of math, a graph. It changed the world in both ways. I think Blowing in the Wind is a song that we will sing for a long time as Homo sapiens. But also what Ricardo did was so impactful at the time, changed the world and changed the way economists think about their discipline as well. Super profound, but from a very simple idea. This is almost like the designer dream of less is more. You simplify a model, you make it so simple that as you make it simple, you make it more powerful. That's the way Ricardo taught us how to do economics, which is kind of really very impressive. But let me get to the like haha moment in this model, because you may still be looking at this and wondering, what is Alberto blabbing about? Why is this so cool? I don't see it. It's like a couple of lines, fine. So one thing that politicians were obsessed about, and it's interesting because that's also what current politicians seems to be obsessed about, was just how long this thing was. Like, look, that this PPC is so long, it's so cool. This PPC is not as long, bad. This is bad. And you can hear these arguments being made also nowadays when, with the Trump tariffs and a lot of conversation about trade that sometimes focus on numbers that may or may not be very insightful. But everybody was kind of stuck on the idea that the size of this thing was the important thing. And so why would someone with such a large, big production possibility curve, why would they trade with an economy that was so much less productive? Doesn't make sense. So at the time, the position was, we're just not gonna trade with them. There is no point in trading. And, this is a kind of argument that's understandable. But what Ricardo did, which was really ground shaking, he looked at this simple model, but the model spoke to him in a different way. Instead of focusing on the length of these lines, Ricardo actually looked at the slope of this line and noted that one line was like gentler, less slope, and the other was instead steeper. So Leo had a steeper production possibility curve. Alberto's production possibility curve was gentler. And he asked the question, what does that mean? What does the slope mean? Yes, we all see that Alberto's production possibility curve is big, Leo's is small, but what does it mean that one is steeper than the other? Brilliant way of the model to point something out to Ricardo that other people had missed. And then this is also a lesson in how we take mathematical concepts, a simple mathematical model that actually ties into very profound, very, very, very profound human aspects of our lives. Now, what does that slope indicate? Let's work it out together, which was the first step for Ricardo to develop his kind of ground-shaking view of comparative advantage, which is that thing in the title that was a little bit hard to understand because it's a bit of jargon, right? Now, what is the slope of this line? Well, I'm sure you're super smart, you know how this works. It can be calculated as rise over run geometrically, right? So you can potentially take this, which is the rise, and divide that by the run, which is this. So basically taking 2 points, that's all you need. Calculate rise over run. Sorry, I should move this a little bit up. Okay, so this is the run down there. So you do rise over run, which in this case is, let me make this a little bit smaller up here. That's right, so rise over run, which in this case is 16 divided by 8. And this is equal to 1 divided by 2, if you simplify. All super simple, right? I'm putting a minus in front because this is a downward sloping line. So it has to have a minus. The slope is negative in this case. So the slope of that line is minus 0.5, 1 over 2. That's the slope. Still, people at the time didn't understand why the slope was important. And that's when Ricardo came in even stronger and said, well, let me explain why that slope is super insightful. And in fact, That's all you should be caring about. Forget about how long this is. Care about the slope. Here is the idea that Ricardo expressed, which is brilliant. He was challenging people to think about a situation where, for example, England was only producing rabbit, okay? England is only producing rabbit. And now we want to instead move from 8 rabbits to actually producing 1 banana. So we want to essentially move from a point here where we produce 0 bananas and 8 rabbit. We want to move to a point where we produce 1 banana, so 1 extra banana, and of course, some rabbit. Well, if you think about what the slope is, it's basically telling you rise over run. It's basically what you need to give up in terms of rabbit, in this case, 0.5 rabbit. You have to forgo 0.5 rabbit in order to get a banana. And then, if you do that, if you forgo 0.5 rabbit, you can move along the production possibility curve to this new point. So the new point is 1 banana and 7.5 rabbit. Ricardo has connected the idea of slope and in simple English explained that the slope is what you need to give up in order to get that extra banana. Do you want 1 extra banana? Well, the cost, what you give up, is rabbit. And the exact amount of rabbit is what we call the opportunity cost. So the opportunity cost is equal to minus opportunity cost. This is equal to minus 0.5. That's the opportunity cost, which is equal to the slope. Usually the opportunity cost, we don't put the minus in front, so we just say the opportunity cost is 0.5 kilograms of rabbit if you want to get 1 extra banana. Now, this began to make sense to people at the time. They were like, oh, okay, I get it. If you want to get a banana, what we are losing is rabbit. And you are quantifying how much rabbit we are losing by getting 1 banana. Now, this is really profound because we human beings are obsessed with costs because we want to get more in life usually. And so we try to understand if what we are doing gives us a benefit that it's big enough to justify the cost. But what we are not super good at is understanding what costs are important. So from an accounting perspective, from the perspective of simply accounting, then it makes sense to measure the costs in absolute terms. In this case, the absolute cost is time. Alberto and Leo are sacrificing time to get something done. And there is the temptation to compare the cost in terms of time. But that's the absolute cost. That's what you would find accounting going after most of the time because it's the most obvious cost. But the more profound cost is the opportunity cost. If I tell you that a banana costs 2 hours, you might ask me, what does that mean? Is 2 hours a lot or a little? How am I comparing this? With what? We need to know what the alternative is. And for Ricardo, that was the step that moved him from looking at the length of a PPC to actually looking at the slope. And now all of a sudden, Ricardo was thinking about what we are foregoing, what we are giving up. So instead of thinking of the cost of banana as time, now the cost of banana is the rabbit that I could have gotten if I didn't spend all this time catching or picking up this banana. Now, it's so impactful to think about opportunity cost. Arguably, that's the right way of thinking about cost. That's the human way. For example, think about all of you. I know I made this example before, but stay with me 1 second. All of you are here spending the same amount of time with me to attend this class. Everybody has the same absolute cost. of coming today, including me. It's 1 hour and 15 minutes, something along that line. So 1 hour and 15 minutes, absolute cost of this class right now. But what is your opportunity cost? That's the interesting human question. In order to answer that, we need to first figure out what is your next best alternative. If you weren't here, what would you be doing? You could sleep, play video game, go to the beach, or, party with friends, study for another course, help your mom, and so many options. But what is your preferred one? The next best option that you would have. So if you weren't here, what would you be doing? And also, how much happiness would you derive from doing that alternative thing? You're definitely here, but what are you would be doing if you weren't here? What are you foregoing? If you could answer that in the chat for me, that would be amazing. So just tell me what you would be doing if you weren't here. What would be your next best alternative? Would you go sleep, to the beach, have lunch? Just tell me that, and also how much happiness that would give you if you were actually, in fact, doing the alternative option. I want to do this because I want to get the opportunity cost to feel personal to you, to understand it in practice, in your life. It's kind of very important stuff. So, someone would say eating lunch. Someone is saying part-time job. And I'm assuming that, Kellen, that eating lunch might have given you a certain amount of happiness. Let me guess that maybe that's 7 happiness out of 10. Study at the library, part-time job, walk to my soulmate for 80 years, no happiness. So for Yik, the alternative would have been not so good. Please keep it coming. And by the way, again, thank you so much for participating so actively to this one. Someone would say they would be in bed. So can you see what's happening here? From an accounting perspective, the cost is the same for everybody. But, for example, Kellen would be eating lunch. So the cost to them is the happiness they have foregone because they're not eating lunch. And that was an 8 out of 10 happiness. But for example, Yik actually would be walking for 80 years to find their soulmate as an alternative, and that would be happiness 0. So everyone, Kellen is sacrificing 8 happiness, Yik is sacrificing 0 happiness. So the cost for them is incredibly different. And in fact, everybody is giving me different alternative activities. Now, someone is saying probably studying for another subject, some happiness, a little bit of happiness. You may be missing, by coming to this very class, you may be missing finding your soulmate. And that may be the only opportunity you've ever had was outside the door, but you are sitting with me talking about economics, losing that opportunity for true love for life. How much is that costly? Very costly, something to miss. So from the perspective of an economist, even though we are all spending 1 hour and a half, the cost is incredibly different. And that's a profound, important thing to keep in mind. The cost, the smart way to think about cost is to reflect on what you are giving up, not the absolute value of the cost that you are actually explicitly paying. Yeah, the opportunity cost, exactly. The opportunity cost, as you're pointing out in the chat, is the missing happiness. The happiness that you are missing out. That's the cost. It's invisible. That's why it's so hard. Sherlock Holmes was talking about this in one of the, of the stories of his stories. Sherlock Holmes was like, "Oh, that's very interesting." And Watson was like, "What's interesting?" And Sherlock Holmes was, "I cannot hear any dog barking." And Watson is like, "Well, what's that?" That's invisible. The fact that there was no dog barking It's not something we can measure directly, just like the happiness that you would have gotten. The happiness of the alternative, it's invisible, but it's the most important thing because it really captures what you're sacrificing in a more, in a much more precise way. So this is how we computed. Oh, sorry. Yeah, someone is saying my math was wrong here, and they are absolutely right. This should be instead 8 divided by 16 because it's rise over run. Super sorry. I went too quick for my own good. So 1 over 2. And then we put a minus in front because it's negative slope. Yep. So it's 8 over 16. That was a bad mistake. Yes, and also, I'm sorry for keep going back to the chat, but the conversation is too interesting. Yes, it's like you sacrifice something and you need to judge if what you sacrificed was worth the benefit that you are having taking this activity. For example, Kellen was getting 8 out of 10 happiness from having lunch. So it must mean that this class, spending time with me right now, it's worth for Kellen 8 or more happiness. But if Kellen reflects on this and they're like, well, actually, the satisfaction that I'm getting from this, including the value of my education, the value of the exam, you know, all the reasons why Kellen is watching this video, then Kellen may be like, well, actually, if I do the calculation right, that's only 5 happiness altogether. So comparing with the 8 of having lunch, I made a mistake. The right choice was to go to lunch. And in life, we make a lot of these mistakes sometimes because we don't fully consider the opportunity cost, what we are giving up when we do something. So Katrina, thanks a lot for pointing out the mistake in my slides. That was really, really appreciated. Now, going back to this, let me do what I promised before, which is going back to the slides and show how we covered everything in this one graph, a lot of talking, and we have captured, you know, the same kind of ideas that are in the slides. So first of all, we introduced Leo. So alongside Alberto, which is unchanged with this production possibility curve, we introduced Leo that has same productive activities, same amount of time, but different productivity. And we ended up showing Leo's production possibility curve and Alberto's possibility curve. We kind of introduces the idea that you know, there was a difference in the slope of these curves, and then we just did a quick look at the comparison of their productivities. Alberto is actually faster at both activities, takes only 1 hour for bananas and 2 hours for rabbit. Leo was much slower. So in terms of absolute cost, well, Alberto looks like he is the star. He can do everything so much faster. And that's the idea of absolute advantage that I was talking about. If you consider the absolute cost of producing a rabbit or a banana, then you are getting at the absolute advantage. Whoever has better productivity because they can carry out that activity with less resources, then that agent has the absolute advantage. And Alberto wins the day for both activities. Alberto is just more productive at both things, so he has the absolute advantage at both activities. And this is what I was talking about when politicians were looking at the dimension of the PPC, how long that line was. And clearly, Alberto has the absolute advantage from that perspective. But then we introduced the idea of opportunity cost, right? And this idea instead focuses on the value of the next best alternative. It tells you what is that you are foregoing is the cost that you should consider. Now, if we take this slide, okay, it shows the absolute cost in terms of hours, and we transform this in opportunity cost, that's what we would get. Like for Alberto, let's think about producing a banana. It takes him 1 hour, yes, but what is the opportunity cost of doing that? Well, the opportunity cost is the amount of rabbit that Alberto is losing, and that amount is 0.5 kilograms of rabbit. So the opportunity cost for Alberto is now expressed in the thing that you are giving up, which is rabbit, and how much of it you need to give up. And if you do the same for the other good, like the opportunity cost of rabbit, it's actually you just take the opportunity cost of one thing, for example, bananas, you flip it upside down, and you're gonna find the opportunity cost of the other thing. So the opportunity cost of doing a rabbit is 2 kilograms of bananas. Again, not expressed in hours, but it's expressed in what you're giving up. When you're producing rabbit, you're giving up bananas. For Leo, it's easier because productivity is 4 and 4, so it's the same for both goods. So the opportunity cost is 1 kilogram of rabbit for bananas, and also opportunity cost is the same, 1 kilogram of bananas when it comes to rabbits. Now, this is the interesting part of the problem, where if you look at this from the perspective of the opportunity cost, this table looks a little bit different. Now, let me tell you something about this, because I think it's a pretty profound type of thing that applies to everyday activities that we do. Imagine, go back to the idea and these PPCs that we just showcased for Alberto and Leo. All right, so imagine you are in the office, it's the first day of work, you have been employed at the company, and there is a weird, strict boss that is setting tasks for everybody in the company. And it so happened that this strict boss says, oh, Alberto, you need to produce this point here. Oops, Alberto is like, that's unattainable, I can't make it. Alberto doesn't want to tell the strict, weird boss, because the evil boss, really in this case, because Alberto thinks, well, they're gonna fire me. So Alberto is scrambling to find a solution. And then the weird, strict boss showed no leniency for Leo either. So what's happening to Leo is that also gets a task which is just outside their production possibility curve. And suppose this is like documents, they need to do a certain amount of documents, and they need to do a certain amount of design, right? Imagine this is a more realistic scenario where instead of rabbit and bananas, you can put whatever you want on the Y and on the X axis, and the model doesn't change. So in this case, you have to make some design documents and some admin, and your boss expects those targets. Well, at first you may think we are doomed to fail, right? Because Alberto is very productive but cannot achieve his goal, and Leo is very productive. There's no way they can achieve that point. It's unattainable. So the situation seems like without a clear solution. But also think about this psychologically for a moment. So Alberto is very productive. He's the super cool dude that can do everything super fast. He's the hero of the story so far. And so why would Alberto spend time collaborating with Leo in the office when Alberto cannot even finish his tasks, so he's panicking. Leo also can't finish his own tasks, so there's no spare time there. It really looked like, as humans, our first instinct would be to say, well, Alberto should just cut his losses, work by himself, trying to make a miracle and produce all that the boss wants them to produce. But that's when Ricardo's idea comes in and kind of revised this idea of winners and losers in this context by switching from absolute cost to opportunity cost. And so from this idea of measuring everything in hours to measuring everything in what we are giving up. I didn't even ask you if you think it's possible for Leo to help Alberto achieve his goal. The answer seems no, but we're going to see in a second that it just depends on how you look at the world. But not ideologically, that's not what I mean. I mean the right numbers. Okay, let me show you what I exactly mean with that. Now, we have this setup. This is great. We have now calculated the opportunity cost table. And this is just a clean version of that, essentially, where you can see Alberto and Leo featured producing bananas and rabbit. But instead of writing down the absolute cost, I'm writing down the opportunity cost. And a very different picture emerges. Yes, when it comes to bananas, Alberto is still the cool guy that wins the day. The cost is only 5.5 kilograms of rabbit, and instead Leo is still much more expensive for that activity of producing bananas. In fact, Alberto is twice as productive. Striking. Alberto is the dude. Fantastic. But let's have a look at the other side, rabbit production. Well, look at the cost for Alberto. 2 kilograms, really high cost producing rabbit. Alberto costs a lot when it comes to production of rabbit, but Leo costs substantially less, only 1 kilogram. So the cost is half. In fact, Leo is twice as productive in producing rabbit. It costs only 1 kilogram of banana, right half. So in the end, Alberto has a comparative advantage, or the lowest opportunity cost in producing bananas, but Leo is just as striking, just as amazing in terms of opportunity cost when it comes to producing rabbit. This is a very different view of the world. Whoever we thought was the winner based on the length of the PPC, now in terms of opportunity cost, when you compute the cost in a smart way, they actually are incredibly complementary here, and it really brings up the notion that they should collaborate because they've got different skills. Now, let me do the slides again, just to keep everybody in the position of being able to map what I say to the slides. We computed the opportunity cost of the PPC. We did it directly from the graph. And yes, you were right. The opportunity cost is 8 divided by 16, not the other way around. Great catch. We can compute, of course, the opportunity cost as what we have to give up in order to gain a little bit more of the other thing. Then we looked at these tables to distinguish between absolute cost and opportunity cost. And then this is the important definition that I was introducing, the idea of comparative advantage. So remember, the other one was absolute advantage if you consider the absolute cost. But if you consider the opportunity cost instead, you arrive at the definition of comparative advantage, which is the title of this chapter. You have the comparative advantage at a given activity if you have the lowest opportunity cost at that activity. You have the absolute advantage at one activity if you have the lowest absolute cost. So depending on which cost you consider, you move from comparative advantage to absolute advantage. In this case, goes without saying that Alberto has the comparative advantage at bananas. They have the lowest opportunity cost. And Leo has the comparative advantage at producing rabbit because they have the lowest opportunity cost. And Ian is saying, oh, so now they trade. Yes, that was the light bulb, right? So even the politicians 200 years ago, when Ricardo was drawing this, they were like, oh, now we get it. So we get the math, we understand. We just didn't see the point. The model didn't speak to them because they didn't have one. Ricardo had a model, and the model, like ChatGPT, was like telling him, well, maybe you can rewrite that sentence a little bit better. It's not a language model, cannot speak, but that's what this model did. That was this simple graph did. Just brought Ricardo to that point. But this is not, as I said, ideological. It's actually based on numbers. And in fact, I can prove it to you mathematically every day of the week, 365 days a year. This is true always. Like, take a situation in this table. Gonna do the slides so that I'm also making somebody happy that want the slides. So take a situation where there's no specialization, they don't trade, they just do everything by themselves. Alberto is absolutely freaking out, super stressed. He ended up trying to do everything. A bit of bananas, a bit of rabbits, that's the best they can do. They're on the PPC, fine, that's it. Leo similarly freaking out and doing a little bit of bananas and rabbits. They don't trade, they don't specialize. They end up with a total of 15 and 3. So this is like collectively what they produced. If you just sum this up, that's what you get. And that's the situation where they don't collaborate. They don't trade, they don't exchange, they don't coordinate, they don't do any of that. But what if they did? And what if they did specialize based on the advice of Ricardo to get those with the comparative advantage to specialize in their activity? So Alberto has only 0.5 cost in terms of bananas, has the lowest opportunity cost, has the comparative advantage at bananas. Alberto does only that, and absolutely no rabbits. And Leo, 0 bananas, and instead specializes in rabbit because that's what Leo has a comparative advantage on. Super cool. Is this leading to more productivity? Yes, look at this thing. 16 and 4, you can compare it with the 15 example and before, and you get that there is an increase in total production by 1 kilogram and 1 kilogram. So they can do more together if they specialize and then trade. So in the context of the example, this really means that Leo and Alberto are gonna talk with each other, figure out who has the comparative advantage, then specialize, and then they end up doing only one work, but they exchange. So someone is doing all the design, someone is doing all the documentation, and then they exchange. And of course, I designed this example to have a happy ending because the evil strict boss now can be satisfied. We can actually produce exactly those points outside of the PPC that I was teasing you about, those points outside that felt like we are doomed. Now they can be produced. We did the impossible. We did the magic trick. Both of them are producing now something at the end of the day for the boss that is outside of their production possibility curve. The magic has happened. Why? Because we just looked at the model and we got a little bit smarter in thinking about what these people should do. And that is, in fact, everyone listening to this, the principle of comparative advantage. Everyone is better off if each agent or country specializes in the activity for which they have a comparative advantage. But there is more to this. That's even more. The gains from specialization grow larger and larger as the difference in opportunity cost increases. So the gains from specialization, they get even better if people are more and more different. Now, I know that at the moment, the woke culture is under attack. And it's everybody's, ideas of whether this will, the woke culture will continue or will die over time. It's hard to tell. And one of the principles of the woke culture is diversity, right? The idea that diversity is good. Well, economists don't have any ideological preference as a baseline. Most economists, they are not left-wing, they're not right-wing, they don't think about the world that way. They think about what policy improves society. They're not attached to any particular idea. And the way they think about diversity is through the lenses of this opportunity cost model. Diversity is good. Having Leo in the team, even though apparently he is less productive in absolute terms, is good. Alberto can always benefit from having someone like Leo who is different and maybe even less productive in the team. Always. It's a mathematical truth. It's like the Pythagoras theorem. It applies all the time. It doesn't matter who you are. That's what economists have in mind when we think about diversity. And we even have a result that says the more diverse we have, if we could crank up diversity, that would be even better, right? We get even more efficiency and we can satisfy the evil boss even more, right? That's why economists think that diversity is important and inclusion is important, because it's good. It's good for everybody from an efficiency point of view. Now, there is one example that I should say exists where diversity doesn't harm but also doesn't help. It's only one case. When these production possibility curves, they are essentially parallel to each other, like this. So when they're parallel to each other, then the opportunity cost is the same, and there is no diversity in terms of opportunity cost, and so there is no gain from trading and specializing. But it's a very, very corner case. Otherwise, it's always good for them to specialize and trade. Now, can I ask you a question super quick? Can you tell me if I'm going either too fast, too slow, or if I'm going at the right speed? I am super happy to change the way I talk. I can do it faster, I can do it slower, very happy. The only thing that I care about is that it's the right speed for you. And I usually look at people in the eye, but I can't here, so I'm gonna ask you again to be generous with your time and participate in the chat room, and just tell me if I'm going too fast, too slow, or at the right pace. And I promise I'll take that into account right away and change my speed. As you are hopefully answering that question in the chat room, I am going to go over a very important point here, which is, okay, they trade, but at what price? What are the terms of exchange? Now, this is really important because we have said that diversity is great, but what if Alberto can exploit Leo, or Leo exploit Alberto? Is this still good for society? And how do we think they're gonna bargain? How they're gonna, trade with each other? What are the terms? The terms are really important. In the real world, there are caveats to this idea that trade is always good. If there is a power imbalance between countries, you can see that a lot with the US now, trying to play strategy, an aggressive posture to get better deals, that kind of idea. If that happens, things get a little more complicated. What we are going to do next is just set up a basic idea of how to imagine what's going to be the end of this transaction when they trade. And by the way, the speed is good, pace is good, pace has been good, perfect, all good, all good. I'm actually really happy that I managed to get the right speed. But again, let's keep doing this, okay? If I'm going too fast, too slow, just let me know. So far, it seems to be good. Now, we are talking here about, first of all, Alberto selling bananas, right? Because Alberto specializes in banana, so wants to sell bananas. But what is the price that Alberto is going to accept? So the price for Alberto needs to be large enough, right? That's the thing. If Alberto is to sell the banana, it has to at least recover its cost of collecting it. So the price needs to be greater than the cost for Alberto. Otherwise, Alberto is running a loss. Doesn't make sense. But because we are smart, we are economists, we are going to consider the cost in terms of opportunity cost. So we're going to say that the price has to be at least equal to Alberto's opportunity cost of producing banana, or higher than that. And for Leo, the opposite applies. So from the perspective of Leo specializes in rabbit, so he wants to buy bananas. But as Leo thinks about buying the banana, they have to make sure that they don't pay too much, right? They have to pay less than what would there be their own cost of making their own bananas. So what's going to end up being is that the price for Leo needs to be less than how much Leo would have to spend in terms of the smart cost, the opportunity cost of producing the banana themselves. So this is pretty intuitive, but if you have a question, please ask. This really means that every time you think about trade, the price of a banana is gonna be in between. So it's gonna have to be greater than the opportunity cost of Alberto to produce that banana. But it also needs to be, so it has to be larger than that, but it has to be less than the cost for Leo to actually produce that banana, because otherwise Leo will produce the banana themselves. So here is what we have here. The price will that make both of them happy needs to be in between their opportunity cost. So if that's a question in the exam, just put the price in between the opportunity cost of these two agents, and that's going to be a price that's going to make everybody better off. Of course, we don't know exactly where we are going to end up. Is it going to be a price equal to 0.5 kilogram of rabbit? They are selling a banana, essentially, in exchange for half a rabbit. Is that going to be the thing? Or are they going to get an exchange where one banana costs 1 kilogram of rabbit, which is on the high end of that spectrum? Well, that depends on their bargaining power, culture, norms. It's complicated. Psychology, we don't know exactly. It's an important empirical question that we need to analyze in each specific context. But we can expect the price to be in between them. If the price is very low, they sell a banana for half a rabbit, then Alberto is not going to gain a lot out of this. Might be okay, but just indifferent. If the price is really high, 1 kilogram, Leo might be indifferent and just might go with the deal, but not gain a lot. And in international trade, you see a lot of this going on. We know that it's important how these countries are trading and how much bargaining power they have, how much power they have going into this negotiation. It's very important. So Alberto and Leo, as I was suggesting before, they are better off if they work together. And now we're going to move into this last topic before I wrap up this class, and I give you some time to go to your next engagement. Every week, every class that I do every week, I will be doing a little bit of a recap of that chapter, so that if you have forgotten all about it, you're going to have a quick rundown, a speed run of basically the previous class. So you're like, oh, okay, now I remember what opportunity cost is. And in doing this, I'm usually taking the last couple of slides in the slide deck. I start from the few last slides and I do a summary of the whole chapter based on that. So we make a little bit of progress, but also we revise at the same time. But the last topic that I'm going to cover today is how we draw the production possibility curve for a whole economy. It's not very hard, but stay with me because there are some interesting things going on here. So rabbit, kilograms per day, bananas, kilograms per day. My handwriting, as promised, is getting terrible. Please write better labels. We have Alberto here with 8 kilograms. Leo can do 4 or 4. Alberto can do 16 bananas. And so this is the opportunity cost for Alberto. This is the opportunity cost for Leo. That's it. Now, when we think about the production possibility curve for the whole economy, some of it can be done mechanically and some of it has to be done with some logic behind it. Now, the mechanical part is this. What if, as an economy, we just do rabbit? Well, in that case, it's mechanical. We just add up the amount that Leo can make maximum plus the maximum amount that Alberto can make. That gives you a 12 total. So that's it, 12. This is the first point of the production possibility curve for the economy. It's mathematically given. There's no logic behind it. However, as soon as you want to move away from that point, you need to ask yourself who is going to do the activity that you want the expansion to look like. For example, you want to go from a point where it has 0 bananas and 12 rabbit as an economy to maybe a point with 1 banana being produced as well. So that's it. You want to move from this point to this other point that has 1 banana and a certain amount of rabbit. But the question that you have to ask is, well, who are we gonna ask to produce this extra banana? It could be Alberto or it could be Leo. That's when logic comes in. You need to wonder, who should we ask? If you follow Ricardo's idea, you ask the person with a comparative advantage or the person that has the lowest opportunity cost. And in that case, for bananas, if you remember, it was Alberto. So we can just have a cost of 0.5, which was their opportunity cost. Great. So we get to this other point, which is 11.5. A rabbit, we just lose half a rabbit and we produce one banana. Now, the best way to do this, whenever you figure out who has the comparative advantage, is to do this. You take their PPC, in this case Alberto's PPC, you just move it like this, like you parallel move, shift upward like that. And this is the beginning of your production possibility curve for the economy. If you draw it like this, you'll never fail in the exam. So just transpose that PPC for Alberto. And this is a super cool point. This is an interesting one, because this point here is essentially a point where we are, as a society, producing 16 bananas and 4 rabbit. And at this point, if you squint and look hard enough, you will see that this is where Alberto spends all their time producing banana. That's all Alberto does. And Leo at this point hasn't produced any banana yet. We haven't asked them. So they are still producing 4 rabbit. This is full specialization. Alberto does banana at this point, Leo does rabbit. Now, of course, if we want to go and produce even more bananas, there's no way we can ask Alberto to do that. Alberto is already producing all the banana that they can, but we can ask Leo. That will come at a different opportunity cost. And that's what I've been just doing very quickly here. Took Leo's PPC and move it to the right like that. You can see what I'm talking about. At least at beginning, the slope is gentle. This is a gently downward sloping line. But it gets steeper at a certain point, because the more banana we produce, the more we need now to rely, shift from relying on Alberto, who is very, good at bananas, to Leo that has a higher opportunity cost. So it's gonna look like this, the PPC, like always like outward bowing a bit, sticking out like that. Suppose you do this wrong. This is a great way to know if you're doing something wrong in the exam. Suppose you start by specializing Leo in banana at the beginning, and only after Leo has done all the bananas they can, you switch back to Alberto. You would be building a PPC for the economy that looks like this, instead bending inward. And you should know immediately this is not the most efficient production setup, because the attainable points are these blue ones inside. But if you had instead use the comparative advantage correctly and specialize based on opportunity cost, you could have gotten these attainable points, which means that you would have had these extra opportunities for your economy if you had specialized according to Ricardo. So I'm building here, what I'm building here is the combined production possibility curve for Alberto and Leo as a group if they specialize correctly. And the answer is, in this case, this opportunity cost here. We have some questions coming in, but Trent is doing an amazing job answering. We are going to stay a little bit longer. Even as I stop this stream, I'm going to stay a little bit longer to get more questions if there are. But until then, it's almost 10 minutes before the hour. So I want, as promised, to wrap up, to give everybody a little bit of time to go to the next big thing that you're doing today, your next best alternative. I want to say thank you for coming. Thank you so much for answering on the chat, for allowing me to customize the class, even if it's online. And if you're watching this as a recording, you may come to my live class or my online class. Thank you so much for all the engagement. We are seeing a lot of work being done on academia, on playeconomics.com, assessment, game levels being played. Thank you so much for the active participation, for your comments. And we are going to see you super soon next week for our live and online classes. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Trent, for all your help